Welcome to The Explainer. You've probably wondered, at some point, what is it that makes you, well, you? That core part of yourself that just feels consistent no matter what's going on in your life. Well, today we're going to dive right in. We're exploring the science of personality to map out those patterns that make each of us who we are. So to get us started, let me tell you this incredible story. Picture two best friends, Betty and Ana Maria, separated as little kids way back in 1939. Fast forward 82 years. They finally reunite, both of them now 91 years old. And what did Betty say about seeing her friend again? It was like no time had passed at all. They just picked up right where they left off.
That feeling right there, that's the heart of what we call personality. It's that stable, enduring something that makes you, you across your entire lifetime. So the big question is, how do psychologists actually explain this? How do they map out the very core of who you are?
Okay, so one of the first and definitely most famous maps of personality came from the one and only Sigmund Freud. His whole idea, which was pretty revolutionary at the time, was that the most important parts of who we are completely hidden from us, deep down in our unconscious mind.
He came up with this really powerful analogy, the iceberg. You know that little tip you can see sticking out of the water? Freud said that's your conscious mind. It's everything you're aware of in this moment. But the real action, the vast, massive part of the iceberg hidden under the waves, that's your unconscious. And according to Freud, that's where all your deep-seated drives and conflicts are, shaping literally everything you do and think without you even knowing it.
Freud basically saw this constant, epic battle raging inside all of us. On one side, you've got the id, which is kind of like your inner toddler. It wants what it wants, and it wants it now. On the other side is the superego. That's your inner critic, your moral compass, telling you all the things you shouldn't do. And who's stuck in the middle? The ego. The poor ego is the mediator, trying to make the id happy without breaking the superego's rules, all while just trying to deal with reality.
Now, Freud's ideas were huge, no doubt about it, but they left a lot of scientists scratching their heads and thinking, hang on, do we really need to dig around in all that murky, hidden stuff? What if personality isn't some deep, dark secret? What if it's actually hiding in plain sight in the totally observable ways we behave every single day? And that question, right there, led to a whole different way of mapping the self.
And this brings us right to the modern science of personality, which is all about something called traits. So instead of looking for what's hidden, this approach looks at the consistent patterns that show up in how we act.
So what's a trait exactly? Well, you can think of traits as the basic building blocks of your personality. For example, if you have the trait of sociability, you're probably going to be outgoing and chatty whether you're at a huge party or just a small meeting. They're just those reliable, predictable parts of your character.
So how in the world did scientists figure out which traits really matter? The process is actually pretty amazing. It literally started with the dictionary. Researchers pulled out every single word that could be used to describe a person, and there were 18,000 of them. Then, using some seriously powerful statistics, they figured out which words always seemed to clump together. And this massive effort boiled that huge list down to just 5 core dimensions of personality.
And what we got from all that work is what's known as the Big Five model, which you can remember with the easy acronym OCEAN. It stands for openness, conscientiousness, extroversion, agreeableness, and neuroticism. This gives us a really practical way to talk about who we are. The big idea is that every single person falls somewhere on a spectrum for each of these 5 traits, and your unique combination is what makes you, you.
Okay, so we've got these two very different maps of the self, Freud's deep, hidden unconscious, and the much more observable Big Five traits. But so what? Why does any of this really matter? Well, because it turns out your personality can have a huge, huge impact on one of the most important things in life, your physical health. Let's really dig into that link for a minute. There's so much research now showing that these personality patterns aren't just little quirks about us. They have real, tangible effects on our physical well-being, and maybe even how long we live. For instance, a while back, researchers identified what they called a type A behavior pattern. You probably know someone like this, super competitive, always in a hurry, hard-driven, and impatient. Well, they found that these folks had double the risk of heart disease compared to the more laid-back type B people. And you know what the single most toxic ingredient was? Hostility. And it doesn't stop there. More recently, scientists have pinpointed another risk profile, the type D, or distressed personality. This describes someone who feels a lot of negative emotions, like anxiety and irritation, but they keep it all bottled up inside. and the health results are pretty startling. This pattern is linked to a threefold increased risk for major heart problems, like a heart attack.
But it is not all doom and gloom. Personality isn't just about risk. It can also be a huge source of protection. On the positive side of things, one of the big 5 traits really stands out as a health superstar, and that's conscientiousness. Study after study shows it's one of the single most consistent predictors of a long and healthy life.
So what's the secret sauce? It's not magic. It all comes down to behavior. Conscientious people are just more likely to do all the small, sometimes boring things that add up to good health. You know, they actually exercise, they follow their doctor's advice, they wear their seatbelts. That self-discipline and responsibility pays off in a big way when it comes to living longer.
And this right here is the most important takeaway of all. Your personality is not a life sentence. It is not your destiny. Think of it more like a set of tendencies, or a default setting. And knowing that you might have a tendency to be a little hostile, or that you're maybe not naturally conscientious, that knowledge gives you the power to consciously choose to behave differently.
At the end of the day, your personality is your personal map. It shows you your natural terrain, your mountains, your valleys, your easy, well-worn paths. But a map doesn't tell you where you have to go. Understanding it is just the first step. So the real question is for you, now that you have a better sense of your own map, what new journey will you decide to take?